It's important to allow people of all abilities to visit your site. And so let's talk about accessible parking requirements. Accessible parking is required by federal law. This is the ADA that we're talking about, all right, in all parking lots and parking garages. And that ADA has then been enacted by your state government, all right? So remember when I said that some of the parking lot requirements were found in the state codes? This is the one, all right? And in general, accessible parking is designed to make it easier for people with various disabilities to access your site. Let's start with location. It's very easy to understand. They must be located on the shortest accessible route to the accessible entrance of whatever building you've got or whatever is on your site. All right. So typically that means that they are the closest parking spot to the front entrance of the building. Access aisles. These are, like I said, these kind of striped areas in a parking lot. All right. And they are designed to let people with disabilities get in and out of their vehicles easier. Many of the van vehicles and the larger vehicles have ramps or lifts, and they really need that extra space. So access aisles have to be marked, all right? They got to be striped and marked, and this is to discourage other drivers from parking in them, which is a big problem, all right? They have to be the same length as the space. They can't be cut short in any way. They have to be level, all right, with that parking space. It turns out that 2 accessible parking spaces can share an access aisle if they're designed with 90-degree parking, all right? Angled parking, that doesn't work. And finally, the access aisle can be placed on either side of the parking space. Again, that doesn't work with angled parking. That's really for 90-degree parking. How big does your accessible parking have to be? There's a couple different options. We have car accessible spaces. They have to be 96 inches wide and the access aisle at least 60 inches. All right. And van accessible spaces, they have 2 options, all right, and they can be kind of a wider space with that same 60-inch aisle, or they can be a slightly narrower space with a slightly wider access aisle. All right, and this is so that that van can share an access aisle with the car accessible space. Which brings us to the question, how many spaces do we need? And this is encoded in the ADA. So it depends on how big your parking lot is in general, how many spaces you've got. For example, if you've got, say, 120 spaces in your parking lots, 5 of those spaces must be accessible. That doesn't mean that you have to add an additional 5 for a total of 125. It means that if you've got 120, you need to have at least 5 of them be accessible. All accessible spaces must have signage, all right, and they have to have this specific sign, all right, at this specific height. Right? And they must be clearly marked, and so they can be marked on the pavement, right, with this international symbol of accessibility. That's really common. And again, the access aisle here must be marked as well. How do we show an accessible space on a site plan? It's really typical to mark the site plan with the international accessibility symbol. Looks like this, and here's an example. For some reason they have it going the other direction. Not a big deal. All right. And if it's a van space, it's typical, but it's not shown right here. It's typical that you will write van right on the site plan. All right. And this is to make it easier for everyone to understand what's going on, especially the plan checkers as they review your work.